She combined these qualities with warmth, humor, and an unerring ability always to see the best in people.
Many people who follow the royal family know Queen Camilla as someone who has spent years adapting to life at the center of public attention. Since becoming queen, she has faced constant scrutiny within the monarchy. But now, a surprising new report has left royal watchers stunned after claims emerged that Camilla sold her beloved Ray Mill house in just 48 hours, shortly after a secret verdict reportedly linked to Princess Anne. So what really happened behind the scenes? Why was the property sold so quickly? So, what do you think? Was this simply a personal decision, or is there a much bigger royal story unfolding behind closed doors? Let us know your thoughts, and don't forget to stay tuned for more royal updates. Princess Anne's secret move against Camilla. Camilla Parker Bowles has found herself at the center of a situation she likely never expected to face. This is not about a leaked message, a shocking headline, or another royal gossip story. Instead, it involves two members of the royal family who, according to reports, have quietly and carefully decided that the time has finally come to address a conflict that has been lingering in the background for more than 30 years. Most people are familiar with the simple version of the story. Princess Diana was the wife, Camilla was the woman involved with Charles, and Charles was caught between the two. While that summary is not entirely wrong, it leaves out many of the details that help explain why events unfolding today are attracting so much attention. Princess Diana died in Paris in August 1997 at just 36 years old. By that time, her marriage to Charles had effectively fallen apart years earlier. However, the woman Diana famously referred to as the third person in her marriage did not fade from royal life after Diana's death. Instead, Camilla remained close to Charles, standing by his side as their relationship continued to grow stronger. In 2005, Camilla officially married Charles, marking a major turning point in her public journey. Over the years, she slowly gained greater acceptance from both the royal family and the public. Then came one of the most symbolic moments of all. In May 2023, she entered Westminster Abbey for the coronation wearing the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, a piece of jewelry closely associated with Queen Elizabeth II and one of the late monarch's most treasured possessions. For many observers, that moment seemed like the end of a very long story. After decades of controversy, criticism, and public debate, Camilla appeared to have completed an extraordinary transformation. She had become queen, standing beside King Charles III at one of the most important royal ceremonies in modern history. To many people, it looked as though the final chapter had been written and the past had finally been left behind. But there was one person who apparently never viewed the story as finished: Princess Anne. Anne has spent more than 7 decades as a working member of the royal family. Throughout those years, she witnessed every major event that shaped this complicated royal saga. She saw the release of the infamous Camillagate recordings in 1993. She watched Charles publicly admit to his affair during a television interview in 1994. She saw Diana's emotional panorama interview in 1995, where the princess famously stated that there were 3 people in her marriage. Anne also witnessed the royal divorce in 1996, and just a year later, the devastating tragedy of Diana's death in a Paris tunnel. Unlike many public figures, Anne has never been known for dramatic displays of emotion. She is often described as practical, disciplined, and deeply committed to duty. She rarely speaks publicly about personal matters and has built a reputation for keeping her thoughts to herself. Yet people close to the situation claim that something changed after the coronation. It was not open anger or public resentment. Instead, it was something far quieter and more calculated. Those who observed her describe it as a decision slowly taking shape behind the scenes, a conclusion reached after years of watching events unfold. For months, nothing seemed to happen. Then, according to reports, The moment finally arrived in February of last year. A senior palace aide reportedly made a phone call. The conversation lasted only 9 minutes. On the surface, it may have seemed like an ordinary discussion, but the topic was Camilla. And according to sources familiar with the situation, by the time that brief call ended, the course of events had already begun to shift. However, decisions had been made, plans were moving forward, and what had remained unresolved for decades was suddenly heading in an entirely new direction. Why is Princess Anne revisiting Diana's untold story? Or is there something she's hiding? Let's find out. Princess Anne's 50-year secret. Back in the early 1970s, before Camilla had married anyone, Princess Anne was reportedly in a relationship with a cavalry officer named Andrew Parker Bowles. At the time, the British newspapers covered the story, and it was not just gossip or rumor. It was a real and well-documented relationship. Years later, the woman Andrew Parker Bowles eventually married was Camilla. For more than 50 years, Anne has carried that chapter of history with the same calm, disciplined silence that she is known for. Those close to her say she has never viewed it as a painful heartbreak. Instead, she sees it as information that shaped her understanding of Camilla's character and her willingness to step into situations that may have originally belonged to someone else. Because of that experience, when Diana entered the royal family in 1981, Anne may have already recognized a familiar pattern unfolding before her. Long before the world's cameras focused on the marriage of Charles and Diana, Anne had witnessed something similar in her own life. More than 30 years later, Anne is said to be the only senior royal who carries both a personal connection to these events and a deep understanding of the institution itself. She possesses not only the family's historical memory, but also her own personal perspective on what happened behind the scenes. That brings attention to a place that very few people ever discuss. Hidden inside the Round Tower at Windsor Castle is a section known as the Royal Archives. It is not open to the public. Documentary crews cannot enter, and outside researchers are not allowed access without high-level approval. Inside are the private written records of the British royal family covering much of the 20th century. The collection includes letters, personal diaries, internal memoranda, and private correspondence from the very years when Charles and Diana's marriage was quietly breaking down behind closed doors. Princess Anne reportedly has a level of access to these archives that only a small number of people possess. According to sources, she has spent time reviewing files from the 1980s and 1990s. Not the public version of events that everyone already knows, but the internal records showing how matters were handled behind the scenes. These documents are said to reveal who knew certain information and when they knew it. They may show who helped facilitate the affair, how Diana's concerns were received within the royal household, and which aides supported particular versions of events while protecting certain individuals at the expense of others. According to reports, some people within the royal household have even begun referring to this process as the Windsor Reset. Whether that is an official name or simply a nickname used by staff members, the idea behind it is said to be very real. Anne is not reportedly writing a book, nor is she preparing for a television interview or press conference. That has never been her style. Instead, she is believed to be focused on something much more lasting, making sure that the official historical record is viewed through a different lens by someone who has direct access to the original documents themselves. If that effort is completed, some believe that Camilla's place in the history of the monarchy may not be shaped primarily by her supporters. Instead, it could be influenced by the perspective of Diana's sister-in-law, a woman who has access to the records where much of that history was originally documented. At the same time, Prince William is said to have been dealing with an entirely different battle on another front. How did William reshape a 700-year-old estate? Why did Annabel Elliot suddenly vanish from duchy records after William took control? Let's take a closer look. William's quiet takeover. The Duchy of Cornwall is not usually the kind of thing people think about when they follow royal family stories, but it is actually very important to understand it before any of this makes sense. It is not just a fancy title or a traditional royal symbol. It is a huge, real-world estate with deep history. The duchy was created in the year 1337, and it has been building wealth and influence ever since. Today, it owns large areas of farmland spread across 11 counties in England. It also includes the Isles of Scilly, along with valuable commercial buildings in central London, rental homes, holiday cottages, working farms, mineral rights, and a wide investment portfolio that has been growing for almost 700 years. By 2025, the duchy was producing around £30 million a year in income. What makes it especially powerful is that this is not just passive wealth. Every major decision, how the land is used, which properties are developed, who is employed, and how the income is managed, is under the direct control of Prince William. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away in September 2022, ownership of the duchy automatically moved from King Charles III to William. According to people who observed what followed, William's first steps were extremely precise and carefully calculated, almost like a surgical process rather than an emotional reaction. One of the clearest changes involved Annabel Elliot, the younger sister of Queen Camilla. For many years during Charles's time managing the duchy, she had been involved in interior design work across various duchy properties. Her work reportedly earned her between £19,000 and £82,000 a year, depending on the projects she handled. But after William took over, her name quietly disappeared from the duchy's financial records. There was no announcement, no public explanation, and no visible disagreement. She simply stopped appearing in any official capacity. At the same time, William began bringing in new people to key roles. However, these were not random outside professionals chosen purely for convenience. Many of them came from his own personal network, close friends, trusted associates, and even godparents of his children. In other words, people whose loyalty is directly tied to him. And when you look closely at the timeline of what has actually happened, that description seems to fit very well. Why did Camilla's inner circle begin disappearing? Could there be a split within the royal family? Let's find out. The growing royal divide. In 2025, King Charles reportedly signed official documents that gave both Prince William and Catherine the right to issue royal warrants. These warrants are formal approvals from the monarchy, given to companies and organizations that are allowed to display royal endorsement. They are not just honorary titles. For a long time, they have been one of the clearest ways the royal family shows which businesses and institutions it publicly supports. Because of this, monarchs have traditionally treated the power to grant warrants as something very carefully controlled. So when this authority was extended to William and Catherine while Charles was still alive and actively ruling, many observers inside royal circles saw it as more than a routine update. It looked like a quiet but clear signal that influence within the monarchy was gradually shifting toward the next generation. It was not something openly announced as a big change in power, but inside the palace, few people missed what it suggested. At the same time, there was also a slow reshaping of royal patronages. After Queen Elizabeth II died in 2022, she left behind hundreds of royal patronages attached to charities, organizations, and public institutions. These responsibilities had to be reassigned, and that process has been continuing over time. According to sources, some well-known patronages that were thought to be heading toward Queen Camilla were instead quietly given to other members of the royal family or redistributed elsewhere. There was no official explanation or public statement, just the absence of her name in places where many expected to see it. Around the same period, changes were also noticed within Camilla's extended family connections to the royal household. Tom Parker Bowles, her son, reportedly began receiving fewer invitations to certain royal events he had previously been included in. His attendance at specific gatherings, including some associated with Balmoral, is said to have quietly stopped after the summer of 2024. Similarly, Annabel Elliot, Camilla's sister, who had long been involved in royal-related property and design work, was already removed from the duchy payroll and later appeared less frequently at private seasonal gatherings she had been part of for nearly 20 years. Over time, this gave the impression that the informal network around Camilla within royal life was becoming noticeably smaller and less present at key events. Then came a more sensitive development involving Sarah Ferguson. Her name appeared in documents linked to the Epstein case files released by the United States Department of Justice. While there is no evidence that she committed any crime, her past association with Jeffrey Epstein has remained publicly documented and controversial. Because of Prince Andrew's ongoing situation, any connection to that part of the wider social circle has become highly sensitive for the monarchy, as it risks reputational damage. According to some sources, Prince William is said to have taken a firm position on this issue, reportedly insisting that Camilla should publicly distance herself from Ferguson if she wanted to avoid further political and reputational strain within the institution. Camilla, however, is said to have refused. Ferguson has reportedly been a personal friend of hers for many years, long before she became queen, and stepping away from that friendship under pressure would, for her, feel like abandoning a long-standing personal bond. Whether every detail of that reported conversation is accurate cannot be confirmed, but what is clear is that tensions around the issue have been described as real and ongoing. Over time, this disagreement is said to have contributed to a quieter reduction in Camilla's influence within certain internal palace dynamics. And then, just before Christmas 2024, something happened that reportedly caught the attention of many people close to the situation. What does Camilla's property decision mean? Could her surprising 48-hour house sale signal a major shift in her future plans? Let's find out. Ray Mill House Sale. Ray Mill House in Wiltshire suddenly showed up on the property market without any warning or public announcement. This is not just any ordinary country home. It is Camilla's private countryside retreat, the place she has often described as her personal therapy space, where she could step away from public pressure and royal duties. She bought it long before she ever became queen consort, back in a time when her life was far removed from the formal structure of the monarchy. What made the situation so striking is how quietly it happened. There were no press releases, no official statements, and no public explanation. The house was simply listed, and then, almost unbelievably, it was sold within just 48 hours of going on the market. That kind of speed does not usually happen by chance, especially with a valuable and highly personal property. It suggests urgency, not coincidence. People generally do not part with a deeply personal sanctuary so easily. A home like this is more than real estate. It represents privacy, independence, and a sense of identity that exists outside royal duties, titles, and public expectations. For someone in Camilla's position, letting go of such a place usually signals that something significant has changed behind the scenes in how she views her future. According to sources familiar with the situation, Camilla had long kept Ray Mill House as a kind of safety net. It was meant to be her fallback position, a private address that would always belong to her, no matter what happened within the royal household or how her official role evolved over time. The fact that she moved so quickly to sell it suggests a shift in thinking. Instead of holding on to it for security or emotional reassurance, she may now be prioritizing financial flexibility and practicality over personal retreat space. In other words, she appears to have reassessed what she truly needs going forward. To understand why that matters, it helps to look at the wider royal structure. At present, Camilla has access to several major residences as part of her role, including Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, Sandringham, and Balmoral. These properties are tied to the crown and the reigning monarch, meaning they are not personal assets in the usual sense. However, when King Charles passes away, the arrangement changes significantly. Most of those residences are expected to pass to Prince William as the next monarch. This would leave Camilla in a much smaller position in terms of official residences and influence over royal properties. In that scenario, her more realistic long-term holdings would likely be limited to Clarence House, valued at roughly £72 million, and Highgrove, valued at around £39 million. While these are still extremely valuable estates by any normal measure, they represent a much narrower and more constrained lifestyle compared to her current status at the center of royal life. Seen in that light, the rapid sale of Ray Mill House suggests she may have already made a clear and practical calculation about what life could look like ahead and chosen to adjust to it sooner rather than later. What is King Charles's stance in all of this? Is he on Camilla's side? Let's take a closer look. King Charles' position. Charles is fully aware of everything that is unfolding around him. That, more than anything else, is what makes the situation so difficult to watch, regardless of where anyone stands or what opinions they hold about the individuals involved. He understands clearly what is being done by his sister, and he also understands just as clearly what is being done by his son. Reports suggest that he had a private phone call with Anne last February that lasted around 40 minutes. However, despite the length of the conversation, it ended without any real resolution or agreement between them. At the same time, Charles is now 77 years old, and after being diagnosed with cancer in early 2024, he has continued to maintain his public responsibilities with remarkable discipline and determination over the years. Yet, discipline alone does not equal unlimited strength or energy. Managing a deep and ongoing internal conflict on two separate fronts, particularly one that also involves supporting Camilla, would demand far more physical and emotional capacity than he is currently able to give. This becomes even more complicated by the fact that public perception in the country still strongly and instinctively links Camilla to the long shadow of Diana's story. According to sources close to the situation, Charles has privately told a senior aide that he understands what is happening and that he does not hold any personal blame against either William or Anne. Instead, he is said to feel that he simply does not have a workable answer or solution that could satisfy either side or bring the conflict to an end. And it is precisely this absence of intervention, more than any other factor in the entire situation, that leaves Camilla in such a vulnerable position. As long as Charles remains unable or unwilling to step directly into the dispute, there is no balancing force within the royal structure. There is no figure with both the authority and the willingness to stand firmly against both William and Anne at the same time. In that vacuum, Camilla is left to navigate the situation largely on her own. From the perspective of those inside the institution, according to sources, what this looks like is a slow and carefully managed erosion of her position and public image. It does not take the form of a single dramatic confrontation or an openly declared campaign. Instead, it unfolds through a series of small, quiet, and carefully chosen decisions. Each one, on its own, can be explained away, justified, or dismissed as routine procedure. But taken together, they begin to form a consistent and unmistakable pattern that she can clearly recognize, even if it is never openly acknowledged. Camilla is said to have directly sought explanations from senior aides regarding certain decisions that affected her role and standing. She has privately questioned changes in patronages and responsibilities, and she has also asked why specific invitations and appearances that would normally be expected have quietly stopped arriving. The responses she receives are described as formal, procedural, and final in tone. There is no space for open disagreement because there is no single official announcement or declared policy to challenge. Instead, everything exists as a series of administrative actions that, individually, appear ordinary but collectively create a direction of travel that is difficult to confront without appearing overly suspicious or unreasonable. William, for his part, has not issued any public criticism of Camilla, nor has he made any formal statements or interviews addressing her directly. There has been no visible briefing against her in an official capacity. However, Over the course of the past 3 years, his approach has been defined not by words, but by consistent, deliberate, and carefully measured actions. Through those actions, his position has become increasingly clear without ever needing to be explicitly stated. What challenges is William going through? Has he been through such before? Let's find out. William's silent struggles. There is a well-known photograph from September 1997 that many people remember clearly. It shows 2 young boys walking behind their mother's coffin through the streets of London. William was 15 years old, and Harry was 12. The streets were completely quiet except for the sound of horses' hooves on the stone road. William has never spoken publicly in detail about what that day felt like. He has not written about it either. However, people who know him say he has mentioned it privately over the years, often in very short and careful comments. According to one close friend, he once said the hardest part was not walking behind the coffin itself. The hardest part, he reportedly explained, was the feeling that the woman he believed had deeply hurt his mother was still alive, still close to his father, and still becoming part of the family life his mother once had. This conversation is said to have taken place around 1998, when he was about 16 years old. There is also another story from a few years earlier, when he was around 13. A former member of the royal household later said that William once asked a tutor what the word adultery meant after seeing it in a newspaper headline. The tutor did not answer directly. It is not possible to know exactly how that moment happened, but it is believable given the kind of headlines and family situation he was exposed to at the time. His parents' marriage was breaking down in public, his mother's struggles were being reported across the press, and the people involved were constantly mentioned in newspapers. At that age, he was old enough to read and understand what he was seeing. He is now of age. He now oversees one of the most important royal estates in Britain. He has influence over staffing decisions, patronages, and invitations, and according to public observation, he has never shown any clear sign that he has fully moved past what he experienced during his mother's lifetime. The difficult part for many people watching this story is that Camilla has, by traditional standards, reached full acceptance within the monarchy. She married Charles, received her royal title, and was crowned Queen in Westminster Abbey in May 2023, wearing the late Queen's tiara while cameras recorded the moment from every angle. In official terms, her position is secure and fully recognized. Over time, much of the public controversy has faded and the institution has formally accepted her role. But the deeper emotional conflict, as some see it, was never only about Charles. It has always been tied to Diana. And because William now holds significant influence, Princess Anne oversees key traditions and archives, and Diana's memory still carries strong public emotion. The story around her legacy continues to shape how events are viewed. So, what do you think about Camilla selling the Ray Mill house? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.